Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Robert Raven here. Today we're going to do episode 7 of Eric's solo campaign. When last we left off, Eric died against the dragon that was hidden underneath our village. So that's where we will leave off. Or begin, sorry. As everything is black and our mind is somehow still wandering, we can hear a disembodied voice telling us to follow the path of what you hear in your heart. And as we hear this disembodied voice say this, everything goes from black to being visible again. And as we are able to see, we notice that we are in an enclosed room with wooden floors and a hallway that leads down into darkness. And at the end of the hallway, we can see a bunch of rocks piled up in the corner. And as we're looking around and investigating, we hear the disembodied voice again. It says, "The path is not over. Will you seek revenge? Find me within your heart. The center is the end." And as we hear this, we're just getting up to the rocks. And as we get up to the rocks and we start to look around at them, we notice that the rocks are starting to vibrate and twist and turn and rotate. And as they do, we panic and we jump back. And as we jump back, the rocks continue to twist and turn. And as they twist and turn and rotate and stack up on top of each other, it makes the rough shape of a humanoid as a rock golem appears in front of us. And this rock golem is the guardian of this tower, from what we can tell. And as it appears in its massive form, it is towering above us as we are standing there in between its toes, looking up, cowering in fear. It looks down at us, and in a deep, booming voice, it says, "Young boy, you have been sent here, near and dear. Will you accept revenge, or will you be overcome by fear?" And as he says that, a black aura begins to wreath around him. And as it does, we begin to sweat and feel panicked and have an overwhelming sensation of the want to run away almost overcome us. But right as we're just about to turn and run, we hear that disembodied voice once again that says, "Revenge is near. Do not accept fear." And as we hear this, we have a flashback and we remember our best friend Tigron as we were inside him and listening to his roars as we both burned in that dragon's fire. And as the rage begins to consume us and our eyes turn black, the golem looks down and in his deep booming voice he says, "You have accepted rage. You may continue. Remember, the fear will always be with you." And as he says that, he unassembles himself and twists and turns and rotates backwards and becomes a pile of rocks on the ground again. And as that happens, a pathway leading to a what looks like an open room appears. And as we walk around the corner and we get into the pathway, we are confronted by the ghost of our father. And as the ghost of our father appears, we begin to panic and become overwhelmed with fright. And then we clench our fists and remember what happened. And we don't know where our dad is, but we know that he's strong and he should be safe. This is just an illusion. I will escape. And as we say this to ourselves, the illusion of our father disappears, opening up the pathway. And as we continue to walk forward, we come to what looks like a wall with a open arched doorway with no door, and inside we can see a big room that's dimly lit. We can't really see very well what's in the room quite yet, but we notice one thing, and that is there's a mural of some sort on the ground. So, as we notice all of this, we are going to go, and as we go to come up to the archway, we notice right as we're about to step through, we stop as we see a glimmer of light and a ripple. And as we notice this, we hesitate once again in fear. And as the fear begins to almost overcome us, we remember that somehow what happened to us wasn't the end. Was it an illusion? We don't know. And so we stick our hand out and just barely with our finger touch the ripple and shiny part of the clearing. And as we do, our finger goes through. And as it starts to go through, it feels icy cold at first, and then the feeling completely disappears as if nothing's there. And as we notice this, we begin to panic. And as we begin to panic, we trip over ourselves and fall forward. And as we fall forward, we fall into the opening. And as we fall into the opening, our whole body begins to become overwhelmed with immense cold before the cold becomes so cold that it begins to burn. And then that burning gets so hot that we begin to sweat. And as we begin to sweat, the sweat drops from our face as little droplets of ice. And as this is happening, the light in the room begins to slowly get stronger. And as the room lights up, we notice that there are 4 massive pillars in this room, each with a line connecting to it, and then another line going through both of those lines, making a double cross that is connected. And in the center of this double cross, there is the face of a what looks like to be a king with his crown, and part of his face eating away as if it had been attacked by some a poison or something acidic. You can see you can see part of his cheekbone and part of his eye socket, and most of his upper lip on the left hand side is gone. And then on that left side of his face that is damaged, he also has what looks like to be a gemstone eye that is black. And around the mural of this man is a circle, and inside the circle is a bunch of old symbols that we actually notice and recognize because of our father teaching us the ancient language of our village. And so, as we look and take about 30 minutes to investigate this whole circle and try our best to decipher what it says, because we're not very good at the language, but we do know it. Um, we are able to decipher a few keywords. It says forgotten king lay here sealed. And that's all we can make out. Um, and as we read this in our heads and writing it down, taking our notes, the image begins to glow in a blackened light. And as this blackened light begins to absorb the mural and consume us within its darkness, at first we begin to panic and try to run. And then we once again hear that disembodied voice. And it says, "For you who have found my resting place, take me within thee. Let revenge be so all consuming. The world will be yours." And as we hear this voice, we turn, and as we turn, we see this shadow begin to appear. And as this shadowy figure appears, we begin to panic and fall down onto our ass and try and scoot back, running away. And as this happens, the shadowy figure simply reaches its hand out and says, "Do you accept thine offer?" And as he says this, we look at his hand and we look at the shadowy figure and we think to ourselves, this is probably not the smartest choice, for this voice has been talking about being consumed by rage. But at this point, that is all we feel. And as we look down, we notice our hands and body starting to dissipate as we slowly begin to become incorporeal. And as this happens and we look at ourselves beginning to panic and cry, the shadow figure says, "The night is not over. Our souls can be intertwined. Revenge is not just yours. It is birthed from thine. And as he says this, we get an overwhelming feeling of rage, revenge, consumption, the want to never die, the want to obliterate anything and everything that has to do with that dragon, the want to become the one. And as this want overcomes us, the shadow grabs us by our hand. And as it grabs us by our hand and we nod our head in acceptance, he becomes absorbed within our body as our body begins to slowly become corporeal again, and then a flash of black as we slowly watch our life flash before us. And as every memory flashes before us after it flashes in front of our eyes, it's disintegrated and torn from our memory and thought. And as the last memory fades, a crow appears and it looks at us and says, "The birth of Maximilian is here. Rise from the ashes. Take back the world. The primordial I will..." Excuse me, I had the yawn. "The primordial I will now be unfurled." And as the crow says this, it flies forward, hitting us in the chest and crawling itself into our body as it becomes one with us, and a tattoo of a crow appears on our chest. And that is where we will leave it for today's episode. Thank you all. Like, subscribe, and join us on our adventures for more.